Okay, we ready?
This is it. Can
Hey, I'm calling Brendan sick. Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I took him to the doctor and he's diagnosed with the influenza. Okay. Probably tomorrow too. We'll see. Okay.
Okay, good morning. We'll go ahead and call the order of the Valley County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First off, we'll have a roll call.
Oh, Commissioner Potter,
Here.
Yarzo,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Mabe, and Schneider is excused.
Okay, seeing a quorum present, we're ready for our work session. This is going to be pretty informal today. We're in the process of working through the comprehensive plan, which is the guidance document for the land use ordinances for Valley County. It provides kind of a foundation that our actual code follows. And so what we're trying to do is to have a conversation with some interested parties and organizations that for today, this soil and water and fire folks, for you to provide us some input as we work through that document, things that you feel are important to have in that document. And so this is going to be kind of an informal conversation, and I invite you to come up to the table when it's your turn. We've kind of, we tentatively planned about 15 minutes. We're a little flexible on that for time for you to visit with us about things that are important, and that should be put into the document. Cindy, is there anything else that I'm forgetting?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yet.
So let me ask this question. Of the two groups that are here, is there anybody that has a pressing appointment that needs to get out of here sooner than later? John, you do? But you're in both groups, so it doesn't matter, so. Okay, let's go ahead if you, all right, let's go ahead and with the Soil and Water Conservation District first, and come on up to the table. I invite you all to come up if you'd like, and just have a conversation about input. We have received a document. I call it the red line version.
Well, some of them are broke, so don't use that one.
Oh, that one's good right there. I just
Brad, will you maybe turn that mic in front of you the other way?
Yeah, that was Ben.
Nice.
He did it.
In front center.
That worked.
Good. I can see you. Do we have enough?
You got enough, Leonard, thank you. Okay, so I don't know who your spokesperson is, but we have received this document from the Soil and Water about suggested amendments. One thing that I might say before we get too far into this, having read the document there, and we had a little bit of discussion about this at our last meeting, the comprehensive plan is something where we want to have overarching principles which are not too detailed. Some of the things that I did read in here probably actually belong in the ordinance and not in the comprehensive. Just keep that in mind as we have our discussion. Invite your input to talk to us about the comprehensive plan. Who's first?
I'll start it off.
Great.
I'm not shy.
Yeah, say your name just for the record. So
Leonard Long, I live here in Cascade.
great, thanks.
So one of the items that we have in the, for a change in the comprehensive plan deals with naming a shoreline zone. And This came about over a few years of observing construction along the shoreline where people are actually dozing soil into the water. There are places where there's a lot of vegetation and things of that nature. So one of the main topics is to get people within the shoreline zone of about 300 feet educated on good practices, best management practices, good practices for dealing with property on the shoreline. This is not new. It's something that Lake Coeur d'Alene, Payette Lake has, Priest Lake, Kootenai County has a protection zone, Penderall, Lake Tahoe, Lake Champlain in New York, and Lake George. Both of those have toxic algae problems. They also have a shoreline zone. So it's not new. We also, as a county, have a shoreline protective zone from the high water mark out, where we have wake zone protection. The protection zone up in McCall is actually 100 feet in from the high water mark shoreline inward. And what we're proposing is actually to have a 300-foot shoreline zone. And to do that, it would require changes to 3 chapters of the comprehensive plan. Chapter 4, under natural resources, to put in some definitions. Chapter 6, special areas and sites. And chapter 12, I believe it is, the actual definition of a shoreline zone. Chapter 15, sorry. So that a shoreline zone would be established. Now, there's also a shoreline zone that's been put into the 2000 DEQ implementation plan in the agricultural section. So this concept, like I say, is not new. In the DEQ plan, they actually had a 150-foot setback zone, and they classified it as a tier 1 area around waterways. So I won't go into all the details. It's written up right here in the documents. But the concept that we're trying to get across is to set up a special zone around the shoreline and around rivers that have TMDLs, total daily maximum load targets that we're trying to meet with DEQ. And also some of the angst that came out of the McCall area on the impact areas is because the county doesn't have regulations protecting the shoreline. And this would quell that particular issue. So at any rate, I encourage you to read what we put in there in regards to the impact zone and go from there.
So Leonard, can you walk us through, and maybe the rest of you, some of the best management practices that you would like to see implemented within that zone? Just to kind of give us an idea of, let's say for instance, there's a conditional use permit within that 300-foot zone area.
Mhm.
What is this zone going to facilitate?
Actually, I wrote up a code and submitted it to Cinda. So there is a fair amount of detail that answers all those specific questions. But essentially, it would be when you're constructing in this zone to actually implement best management practices like a silt fence or straw wattles to protect the shoreline.
They have this in their packet.
Is that what you gave us
Okay,
today?
great.
That's the land use and development
Okay.
work group summary. And it doesn't address some.
The other would be some educational materials for the people who live along the shoreline. And the other would be education for contractors who build along the shoreline. It's like right now, McCall, when you build within, I think it's 100 feet, the contractors take a training that's put on by the city of McCall, dealing with best management practices. The other is encouraging the landowners to put in native materials along the shoreline rather than heavily landscaped areas where they're using a lot of fertilizer. But, yeah.
So are you going off what you submitted today or what your recommended changes were, Dorina?
What we submitted to you,
Today.
In this document.
in that document, yes. I just included, if those recommendations came from this coalition work group. So that's what they have, is just the illustrated information from the coalition work groups.
The other would be, let me back up just a minute. And that is, when it comes to best management practices, the way the regulations are written right now, if a property is greater than 1 acre in size, they actually have to submit a stormwater pollution prevention plan as part of the permitting process. But those that are less than 1 acre fall into a crack where they don't actually have to do that. And the concept would be to have them put in a minimum best management practices, a silt fence, wattle tip.
In your discussions on the 300-foot zone, or in Carl's case, it's the 100-foot setback. But is there anything taken into account for elevation differences? And what I'm talking about is around Cascade, Lake Cascade. We have, for instance, north of Little Donner Hill, the land is very, very flat, gradual slopes into reservoir. 300-foot setback in that area means one thing. But if you go up around, like the Donnelly boat docks are, 300-foot setback, first of all, the bank goes up 20 or 30 feet, and then you get 300 foot. Is there anything taken into account for BMPs for those different types of slopes?
No, actually, the distance came from a discussion that Cinda and I had, where Cinda's already dealing in permitting with flood management and setback zones, dealing with flood controls. And she and I thought 300 feet falls in that criteria, flood control. So it would be easier for planning and zoning to have one distance rather than us coming up with 200 feet or 100 feet. So that's really where this came about. Now, it's up for discussion, and no, to answer your question, we didn't really look at elevation.
I think certain BMPs would apply differently in those, if they follow those standards.
And BMPs also would apply if you're actually putting in riprap, to where people now, they can just excavate in the water and dump riprap uncontrolled, and it would actually be putting in a sediment barrier to keep the sediment from going.
But Cindy, wouldn't they be required to, at what point in time does a landowner have to get a permit from either the Bureau or what's the other agency for?
Idaho Department of Water Resources, Corps of Engineers joint
Corps of
application.
Engineers, yeah. At what point in time does a landowner trigger that?
The Corps of Engineer one is if they're in the wetlands, and the Bureau application is if they're on the Bureau property. But anything in the floodplain has to have a floodplain development permit. And then anything within 300 feet of that floodplain has to be elevated 2 feet above that base flood elevation. That's why we had talked about the 300 feet.
Questions, discussions? Thoughts?
Maybe we're short of time, since there's not, maybe we should move on to some of the other.
Just a quick concern I wanted to just bring up. The recent change to the comp plan about growth supposed to be coming from the city and out. I've heard too many times coming in here where it's like, well, we don't have to follow the comp plan. So as a citizen, it's, you come in, you expect that, well, we're just gonna follow these rules but then they don't. To be, for water and soil, to have control of septics and wells, to be able to tie into water and sewer and keep the growth from the city out, really, help water and soil.
I think we have some of those concepts in our comp plan. They're existing that, and state law, I know, encourages that as well.
But encourage, is one thing, but then when it keeps, getting ignored, it makes it hard, for citizen to understand why it's getting ignored.
I think it's the misunderstanding the comprehensive plan is a guide, not necessarily a rule.
Yeah, no, I understand it's a tool, but, it feels like it's really not being used at all. So we come in and just keeps getting ignored. And that's where it's hard for the citizen to understand, like, why does this keep getting passed over?
One of the things that we have in the ordinances in Valley County is entire county is a multi-use or not overlay zone. So if there are developments that are proposed out in rural areas that are away from infrastructure, they are allowed by our ordinance. There are encouragements though for central sewer and water and things like that. And lot size also limits that as well. There was a change a couple of years ago where the minimum lot size went from 2 acres down to 1 acre. So that makes a bit of a change as well.
Well, originally, just to be precise, it was 1 acre, and then we increased it to 2 acres, and then they turned into weed patches, so they decreased it back to 1. The reason we had increased it to the 2 acres was to try to get people to cluster houses, and they just didn't. Then they just went with cookie cutter. We went back to the 1 acre. The 2 acres kind of consumed land versus.
I think the point that you're raising is that from a soil and water conservation standpoint, it makes sense to try to get those higher impact developments onto central sewer and water systems. And typically those are located near existing infrastructure in the county. I think that's the point. At least that way.
Well, I'll talk now. A lot of the recommendations in underpopulation and natural resources and hazards come from the work group I was on. And many of them are coming from a central idea that there's a necessity now with the growth and the changes in land use patterns and the changes in climate, that we need to consider water more seriously and integrate water into the land use planning right from the start. So that's what the basis of a lot of these suggestions are, especially notions of water supply and water pollution. And those are never directly addressed in the land use planning, but they are going to become more and more crucial in terms of where you grow and what you're going to allow to grow. Just for example, the Red Ridge Village that you're going to have to
Let's
deal
not
with.
talk about that.
Let's open that can of worms.
Okay.
That's a
Well, let's
site
just say
specific
water
application from
supply
the
is-
DNC.
Okay, let's just say whether there's available water supply is a huge issue. We have limited data, and so some of these things are suggestions about how to get more data, but also requiring water availability assessments on a big development that is going to use groundwater is crucial. One of the things that we heard in the coalition when we did the workshops with people and they wrote things they were worried about on the interactive maps was their wells. I'm worried about my well. I'm worried about developments that may cause my well level to go down. I'm worried about close septic systems next to wells. I'm worried about my wells getting polluted by septic systems that aren't maintained or that are too close in the development next to me. So this is one of the things that we were trying to address by saying we have to consider water more closely in our development land use decisions. A lot of times it's an afterthought.
Judy, has there been any work done through the Soil and Water Conservation or through the University of Idaho's studies about water quality in different zones of water? And let me describe what I'm talking about. If a municipality drills a well and it goes 600 feet deep, you're into a deep aquifer. We have multiple wells like that. I know there's an irrigation well south. Donnelly has one. McCall gets their water primarily from the lake.
Yes.
But there are some, and Tamarack has one that's deep. So that's really the deep aquifers we're talking about. And then we have the homeowners' wells, which range from anywhere from about 20 feet
Yeah.
Or less.
down to, potentially 200 or 300 feet. And if they go that deep, they've probably got water softener because they got iron. And then there's the water quantity and quality that is basically that, I'll call it just subsurface levels, like from ground level down to like the first clay layers and things like that. And then you have surface water quantities. Have you guys in Soil and Water Conservation had discussions about concerns about any of those separately? Has the University of Idaho, have you done any studies about quality monitoring? Has there been work done in the past? Because I think some of that would help guide policy and the ordinances of Valley County, what we're trying to do. Is there a problem? And we don't have to get
One
to
of the things that we're finding is that there's very little data. Like she mentioned, Water Resource Department, I believe, has 4 monitoring wells in Valley County. That's not a lot.
At what depth?
I don't know, right offhand. We could find that out and get back to you on it. But one of the things that we are doing is we're pursuing a grant right now through the philanthropy, Northwest Philanthropy Grant. And it's actually to hire people from the university and the Water Research Institute to look at Valley County and look at what our needs are. Right now, we don't even know what we need. And then find out, after we get this needs study done, then go in and look at specific zones or what have you. So we're in the infancy of really looking into this. And right now, we have this much money to do it. And we're hoping to get, I think this philanthropy grant is $250,000 to do that.
The thing is, and we've written we just sent a letter 2 weeks ago to Idaho Geological Society because we knew that they were coordinating with IDQ to do a data assessment on groundwater in Valley County. They're doing it in counties. But we said, please have our county involved in this study. They wrote back and said, yes, we are absolutely going to do Valley County. And when I talked to them and said, we have looked at the growth patterns and we know Valley County is going to need this. And our water master says the same thing. You are going to need to assess your groundwater. And whether it's different levels or or higher levels. It's expensive proposition, but they're going to do it, and their first results are coming out in summer 26. But that is just easily available data. They're just assessing where the data gaps are. So if you look at Cascade is having a challenge now with water availability. There has that well, that's one of the wells of the 4 is right there on that southern basin. That has been the well that has decreased in terms of water level. And so I guess Cascade is thinking of what they're gonna do in terms of wells, how many they're gonna have to drill. The EPA people that are working with them said that they're going to have to
So
consider all this.
Cindy, I have a question on monitoring. Is Valley County doing any monitoring? Engineer or anybody on it? Or quality issues?
No, yesterday there was a condition of approval put on a permit that one of the wells on site has to be monitored in conjunction with IDWR and DEQ.
Monitored for what and what
Depths.
levels?
The water monitoring,
Just for
to figure out what the depth is.
depth of water.
Leonard has his hand up.
There was one report that was done about a year ago where DEQ came up and they sampled about a dozen wells. I don't recall
It's
the
the
total.
1922 report.
Right.
Rebecca Goring just published. I know we sent it to,
And those were
I can resend that.
residential wells. And a bunch of them came back impacted with contaminant.
All of them came back with above the phosphorus.
Wasn't that on the west side?
They were not all on the west side.
Some of them were up north in Donnelly. So it was a scattering around the lake.
So, and this is gonna test my memory a little bit, but back when I was on the TMDL, and John, you were on it with me. We, in the first interim TMDL that was developed in the mid-90s, there was a significant amount of groundwater monitoring done. And is that data still available as a potential background?
Sure it is.
I have the TMDL book on this table. It's right over there. Of what?
Okay, well, I don't want to
We
get
need to pull it out right now. Oh, that's the book.
I don't want to get too bogged down in the weeds here, which I have a tendency to do, so I apologize for that. I want to invite my fellow commissioners to raise questions or discussion. Do you have other points you guys want to make as well?
I just want to note that when you put in a lot of shallow wells, say in a subdivision that isn't, so they're not using a single source that's easy to monitor, it's going to take groundwater that might otherwise drain into a stream, and get enough groundwater pulled out, you don't get the springs coming out into the rivers. It affects the irrigators who already have previous rights. It's pretty hard to regulate individual wells. It's much more preferable, in my mind, to have a single well where everybody knows what's coming out and can be monitored. Or, and another example would be McCall, which relies on the lake, but they have a limited amount of, they're drawing more water than their right. And the state knows that, so it's something they can deal with by selling water back to the city of McCall from the rental pool. So it's well regulated and watched by the state, and that protects all the water users. Whereas, willy-nilly wells everywhere, they're guaranteed enough water to irrigate their half acre if they have that big of a lot. And that's state law, which they've been thinking about reducing to a quarter acre, which means everybody would get a quarter acre covered with 1 foot of water. That's pretty much the max. But it's, like I said, it's very hard to regulate that unless you put individual monitoring in each well. So anyway, and as we all know, IDWR has been up here trying to sort this situation out because of complaints from water users down in the Emmett area of being shorted. So that's in the future anyway that we'll all have to be.
Sure, I'm very familiar with
Yes, I'm sure you are.
You're on that audit call.
it. I'm on the advisory committees.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
it's,
I'm just saying stuff so that when we have people here that may not be familiar with that, and we sort of have pounded into our head every month, IDWR, what they're up to.
Art, you bring up an issue that is going to cause a lot of discussions in the future about this water situation. You're going to have to defend water for the
Said that
It's going to be a big,
Neil
big
Shippey
issue.
said developers are after. Yeah.
And it's not they're not trying to use it in
In basin.
I'm getting into weeds
No,
here,
not in basin.
but you can't think about water in Idaho. It's up here, I'm gonna use it down here. Stream. You gotta think about water in Idaho as it's up here, or we're gonna use it down in the other courthouse. That's how it works. It doesn't, you gotta get away from the idea that I'm gonna actually use it on this piece of land. Because it's traded all around the state.
I'm sorry I haven't.
Judy, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Careful.
Thank you very
much.
Appreciate it.
Don't hurry.
I mean, everybody has these visuals of what happens if we don't deal with our
Yeah.
water. I mean, it's not going away. It's. Very-
What's interesting is you can actually see the algae blooms on the Google Maps
Yeah.
that show up.
Last one looks like it's in front of our place.
And does anybody want these? I did bring these to share. Who doesn't have those? And that's from EPA data.
The importance of that map are all the red lines, which are all the impacted
They're impaired waterways
waterways, right,
according to IDEQ.
right.
So, and what's the definition of impaired? That means that it's not natural.
Some of them are impaired because of water temperature, some of them because of pollution.
So I'm sensitive of time here, but I'm going to ask one more question because you've gone to a lot of work to put things in writing, and I think we'll have to decide how much of this would actually be adopted in a comp plan versus actually in an ordinance. Is there anything that elevates to a requirement versus a recommendation or a suggestion? Do you see the difference? Like, is there something that this has to be done from an ordinance? Is there anything that you've talked about today that becomes a requirement versus a,
The shoreline zone would be a requirement. People in that zone would have to comply with.
use the best management practices?
Well, I can think of, are you asking for a suggestion as to what would be a good ordinance or a change in the ordinance? 'Cause-
Well, I think that's kind of what you've
Yeah,
submitted.
there's quite a bit of that in there, I think. I understand that. There's a lot of language in there that is more in line with an ordinance.
I think that's where I'm trying to hear your feedback here and what you're asking for and specific to our mission for today, understand what should go in the comprehensive plan and how we should steer people from the comprehensive plan back to an ordinance. Because I think all the feedback you've given us is spot on and valuable. I'm trying to figure out how we mesh that into our comprehensive plan to be a valid guide to people of the growth that we are going to have here. And that's where I'm, at least in my mind, trying to gel this down to something that we can appropriately fit into the comprehensive plan. If you will, memorialize the feedback that you've given us and make sure that it's in there, but without getting down into the ordinance level of feedback.
Yeah, and I don't really have a good answer to that.
Dang.
I know.
I was hoping for the simple button.
No, that's a wish list, really.
Mhm.
And it is also, our opinion of, and yeah, some of it sounds very much like an ordinance. So, I guess it would be, and I really wouldn't know how to, you can soften the verbiage, but the intent is probably, that would be our intent. Is to eventually have that stuff be put into an ordinance and formalized.
And I think the ordinance can be very simple, because right now, what happens on some of these single lots that are less than an acre is, in our discussion with building department, is that they get the call to go out and inspect when the contractor's out there digging for the foundation, where you can put in there that before they break ground, they need to have an inspector come out and inspect the best management practices, and then continue the various inspections. Because the county has plenty of ordinances, codes dealing with foundations and studs and walls and roofing, all those kind of inspections. So it's like one little step at the beginning.
That would be definitely, I think, very important.
I think
But
that,
it's an important, it would be, need to be in the ordinance, just like building codes are, they would seem to be something that the building department would be involved in because it's part of the construction process. And it's already in an ordinance, it's just the ordinance doesn't have language that's very, it doesn't have any inspection process in the ordinance. With 9- site improvement ordinance.
yeah, I think I've actually heard of this in other jurisdictions in Idaho where they actually have a sign off on your building permit line that says, are the BMPs in place?
Right,
And if they're not, you don't proceed.
exactly. And that's lacking in the site improvement 9-4-3-4 county ordinance. County
We
code.
would want to put
That's
it
in your
in,
packet.
in Title 6, not Title 9, which is the building code.
And, well, okay, that's,
Yeah, I agree with you, Art.
Okay.
What? I agree with you.
We can all go home now, Mrs. Goodsall.
my day has been made.
But we would have to also put it in Title 6.
I think that's actually a really good idea.
And are you asking, may I clarify that be in that overlay zone, right?
Yeah.
Just in the overlay zone for the shoreline protection area.
Well,
Well, if it makes sense there, it makes sense. If
Everywhere.
a subdivision out in the middle of wherever, or some other conditional use permit says that they're going to implement BMPs, they ought to implement.
If the subdivision is greater than 1 acre, they have to by state code.
The-
pollution prevention.
Yeah,
plan.
during construction, but we're talking individual
This is the
building sites.
individual lots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when
So-
when you look at individual lots next to creeks, which there are plenty and plenty of examples of folks that have disturbed a lot of ground and then left dirt piles and whatnot, and there's no inspection process that says, you gotta fix this before you proceed. It's not written into the ordinance.
I envision the shoreline protection area as 300 feet from every high water line.
Yeah.
And
Lot of
anything
those.
within that would have to have a BMP inspection prior to site grading, is what they're asking.
Yeah, that's,
Not just the shoreline,
And
the
I'm-
lake shoreline.
and I-
Okay, that's
this isn't coming down hard. What I'm also suggesting here is if somebody wants an exception, they could get an exception, but they need to go through the county engineer so that they can look at the alternative best management practices that they want to do. 'Cause frankly, I don't have a problem with somebody building over the top of a stream if they do it properly and don't pollute the stream. That's a weird
No, it's-
example.
It's actually happened
Sure.
in Valley County.
Okay, but it's the pollution that we're trying to prevent, not people doing what they want to do.
There's a house in McCall where the creek flows down through the house. You guys knew that.
no,
I didn't know.
It also has the
Concept.
largest piece of glass.
Yes.
So that I
And
just,
It's not just pollution, it's
Not
the
me.
riparian area that acts as the cleansing to prevent this.
yeah, the filter, it acts as a filter.
Because with this map, these are all watersheds that drain into Lake Cascade. And more of that riparian area that we destroy, the more likely we will
Is
to
that
escalate balloons.
to your point about the 300 foot, the riparian areas?
yeah, that, I think that's, I'm getting a different understanding now, is this isn't just the shoreline of the lake. You want 300 feet anywhere there's a stream that feeds into the lake as well.
Yeah, it just means that the BMPs are going to be all over. Which is just a good practice regardless, in my mind, as far as being part
Just
of.
rethinking the 300 feet. When you go, because by the time you do 300 feet by 300 feet, you've covered every
Property
Well,
piece of party in Valley County.
Well, that's part of the problem, why we have a.
Here's kind of a
balloon in the reservoir.
conceptual plan. It's like, we're not saying you can't build within this 300 feet, not at all.
Follow the BMPs.
But then I think the 300 feet, if you're in some of the flatter land around the areas and you're putting up silt fencing and that, or 300 feet away from a creek, 100 yards, that's a very long distance in general for any lot
Yeah,
in the county. That seems to be pretty significant. So now I'm questioning the 300 feet. I could understand the 300 feet when it was lake shore. But
Yeah,
I'm
was that-
struggling with that a little bit when I get into,
Kind of like these photos right here, where you have a building construction going on with no best management practices. By the time the construction's done, all this mud's in the street, and then all of it ends up in the lake.
yeah, I understand, excuse me, I understand the concept and what you're after.
Mhm.
I'm struggling with 100 feet, 300 feet, 50 feet. And I'm wondering if there are examples from other municipalities or counties that we can get some science behind setting that number. If there's I'm not at all opposed to what you're telling us we're trying to protect. I'm trying to understand how we would set the boundary so we're not impacting every lot in Valley County.
Mhm.
Does that make,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
And I think we can come up with that.
okay.
We can come up with where these different people, agencies, whether it's Kootenai County or Coeur d'Alene, what their distances are, and things of that nature, and come to an agreement on a particular distance.
I'm thinking it's groups like DEQ have studied, somewhere someone has studied these.
DEQ has in the implementation plan 150 feet for tier one, and that's to keep things back from the water. That is their number.
McCall's is 100.
And McCall is 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps.
Just for example, Practices Act, state law. Classifications of streams. Class 2, smaller headwaters, goldfish habitat.
Right.
30-foot stream connections. One stream is the fisheries, 75 feet. That's for like timber harvest.
That's for timber
Yeah.
harvest, but that's, again, that's. You're kind of protecting against the same thing, given the disruption that occurs with logging operations or whatever.
Concepts same, I mean,
Yeah.
you're trying to protect the stream,
75 feet.
75 feet.
Okay.
And I think what I'm taking away, just for my own thoughts of what goes into the comprehensive plan then, is the concept of how do we give people the concept of what we're after in the comprehensive plan when they want to come and build here in Valley County. So I think it's boiling down the concepts that you guys are talking at to, so we can get some.
I agree with you. And you know, rather than focus on the specific code, the intent is to educate people that are
Coming to
near
the
waterways,
business,
that the waterways are sensitive. And most of the pollution that goes into our streams and lakes, are those properties which are right next to the stream and lake, and they're using fertilizer like crazy and changing oil. We have people that are pushing soil out, trying to build their beach along
Oh, yeah.
the lake and all that. But the biggest concept is the educational component, not necessarily the distance. That's why I'm not as critical about distance as I am the concept.
And I think the discussion was very educational for me, and I tremendously appreciate the input and the time you guys have spent with us today. It's been
So on that
quite
note,
talking with that. You guys could.
from the coalition, there is interest in having a workshop session with you as well regarding the land use and development recommendations from that. And that would include Michelle Ridge, team lead on that group. Do you have anything to add about that? I'd really like to schedule that.
One of the things that we're trying to do is to get the comprehensive plan update actually done. We've been working on it for, 3.5, 4 years. I guess in my mind, I kind of set a target date that we're going to try to get this done here within the next 12 months. And I think what we're going to do is, first of all, receive your input, your requests. And I think it's up to this body to direct staff to try to implement the appropriate things in the comp plan. And then we can also make recommendations about what should actually be. Try to bring some of the concerns that you're bringing forward, which you have a responsibility by state law to do. A lot of people don't understand that the soil and water conservation is a state obligation and law, to try to bring some of those things forward into the comp plan and ordinance. I think, Cinda, if you can maybe work with I know that you work with Dorena and everybody else on these types of topics. If we can get some sort of a draft of where those things should go, based on this discussion today, we can kind of review those. And put that implemented. So I have 5 things written down. Shoreline, these concerns. Dealing with the growth in their cities or infrastructure. Water quality, quantity, and the study of the aquifers. Art brought up the one about water diminishment, springs and wells. That is actually somewhat covered by a current Idaho law. Water rights. Somewhat should be. And then the inspection and sign off on PMPs and that, wherever that, let's say, it's 100 feet, 150 feet, 300 feet shoreline versus other tributaries. Am I missing anything?
I don't think so.
You got all mine.
We're happy to meet with Cinda. We're on a number of conversations already with Cinda, so we're happy to meet with her and iron some of these out.
So where's Michelle's submittal? I was on the same group as Michelle.
Okay.
I also listened to Doing Democracy, and I was a fly on the wall.
So one of the other things that I might ask you to do is, within your soil and water conservation district, and this kind of goes to Colt's point, what are other planning and zoning commissions in the state doing in regard to encouraging, requiring type of development in and near where there's infrastructure? If you guys could take that on, see what's out there so that we can at least look at some different ordinances in the state, that would really be helpful.
I did have one other one, which was kind of the preference for the single larger wells versus multiple small wells. I don't know how we want to necessarily phrase that, but that was one of the things that I took from these gentlemen.
So like central water versus individual wells.
That's how I interpret it, yes. For the subdivisions that are going in. Especially if they're, if my understanding was right, especially if they're not going to be using water. Single larger wells, which can be monitored as opposed to multiple small wells. Does that capture what you were?
Well, our.
Small wells can be monitored also.
Do you want me
There
to
are-
send the 22 groundwater study that DEQ just completed?
And it has application for Valley County.
Yep.
Yes, Valley County. That's good information. Great. I know this is taking a little longer than we anticipated, but I think it was a really good discussion.
Yeah.
We invite you to continue to provide the input in this process.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, really appreciate the
Very
time
much.
you've given us. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to leave.
Oh, yeah, take your.
With the map. And you should have it in your home.
She's leaving.
That's, I've never seen.
That would actually be good to have a big copy of that.
I think that could be in the comprehensive plan. Just include it.
You need a ride back?
I've never actually seen this.
Okay, we'll invite our fire folks to come forward.
It's all the streams in Valley County.
I like it.
I've only got about 15 minutes, so
So
we're meeting at 9:30.
Everything's been locked around it.
You gotta be on the phone for?
We're gonna be in my office for.
Okay, we're gonna go quickly for you.
Yeah, I think ours will be good.
Okay, so maybe if you guys just introduce yourselves, just For the record,
Yeah.
I forgot to do that with the last group.
Steve Hull, the fire chief in Cascades.
Laura Hlavchek, the wildfire mitigation director for Valley County.
One little hug on the
Logistics chair.
hardworking.
So you saw our discussion on the last group. I know, Steve, you're under a bit of a time frame, so
Yeah.
maybe both of you provide us some input about the fire stuff. And I think we have a document as well, don't we, Cindy?
Yes.
Yeah,
It looks
That's
like
his
this.
note.
It says from Mara.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I did sit on their group when they did this, and there was only, I think everything fit perfectly into our plan, except for one thing, and I'm trying to find it. I know which one it was.
Yes, unfortunately. So, as you guys well know, fire's becoming a huge thing. Not that it wasn't back in the day, but our timber resources are getting thicker, more dense. Our rural composition of structures and stuff are expanding as well. And people are just wanting to start living to the woods, right? All of our suggestions from the fire working group is more of a base of education and trying to create a foundation to be able to adopt ordinance and court and codes. And so that's kind of how we went with the comp plan, is truly a foundation of incorporating wildfire in all aspects of the comp plan. Where originally it was just in chapter 4. So we kind of embedded it in every single chapter, and that was really the overall arching goal, was create more of an educational piece, component to be able to do more things in the future. And that's kind of was our understanding of what the comp plan truly is like you guys said, guidance, a foundation point, and then going from there, being able to adopt ordinances, saying that it was in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, to encourage those things. So a lot of it is more like encouraging. We currently already have a wildfire subdivision plan ordinance within Valley County that has been adopted, but also some of those things that we want to do in the future, we kind of embedded into the comp plan, making it so that if you have a PUD or CUP already and it's been sitting dormant for a while, to basically encourage them to utilize that subdivision plan to actually do maintenance work. Because a lot of those PUDs and CUPs will sit for 15, 20 years. And as we well know, timber and brush don't just stay cut. So that's one of the big ones that Cinda brought up when we had our meeting, which I believe is,
So can you point us to the language that would bring into fruition what you're talking about? The weed significantly increase their risk. Sure, that's.
I think it was in chapter 4 was the first one.
that's when we had our meeting that Cinda asked about.
So before you have to take off, Steve, do you have other things you would like to comment?
Well, just the overall goal for this, to kind of get into a few of the weeds, is, as we know, the insurance crisis around, is to be able to promote people to come here and to be able to build within the WUI and be able to get insurance. Like, we have these practices in place, we have an ordinance, we're trying to help people build a safer home, is our overall goal of this. And the way we talked is to have like a WUI layer, so it wouldn't be like countywide. It would be like in the timber area. If you're out in the middle of the field building, it would be different building construction limitations as opposed to in the woods. Well, then urban interface. So that's kind of the concept of how to implement it. Would be in like WUI like that.
So this applies to both concepts. we see a lot of applications come through the planning and zoning. Say, well, wildfire mitigation plan, yeah, stamped, done, approved, build their house. And then what happens? 20, 30, 50 years from now, as trees, brush continue to grow, what are we doing about that? Because that's where the real danger, I mean, may have a really good site initially, but then they let it go. So how do you, because that's what you're dealing with in fire issues. So how do we do something?
Different field types are gonna grow differently. You're gonna have to take that into consideration. Where the fuel types are, you know, like tan, grass, flashy fuels, all that. Because out where I live in Round Valley, you're probably not gonna have a type 10 fuel model out there, so it might be flashy fuels, grass, so you have to take that into consideration.
I think big part is trying to create codes and ordinances where the HOAs are and CCNRs are responsible.
On existing and new subdivisions.
I mean, that's
That's
always
where
a
it gets
discussion point, right? And so with the subdivision fire ordinances, we're trying to create it where it's started from a point of fire prevention, right? So we're trying to make and bolster that plan to create zones so that if you're building within an extreme fire zone area, you might have to do more measures to create more fire resiliency on your structure. And so that's what all these suggestions in the comp plan is geared towards, is adopting new buoy layers, adopting new codes, adopting the new international fire codes. And so we don't state specifically a lot of that stuff, but that's our goal, is to start actually creating code with that. With the existing stuff, that's obviously harder. My understanding takes it. But really, we're trying to start with the new development is one of the biggest goals, because we know that there's going to be growth and there's going to be increase. So I know that's easier to start with than going backwards and making old developments adopt codes. But that is a goal. That would be something
Isn't that where most of your risk though is with the older subdivisions?
It is. And so that's,
So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing one is for any new subdivision development, conditional use permit that we see, we need to make sure that we have good fire wise management procedures that not only happen on day one of the development, but also go into perpetuity. And then the second thing I'm hearing is,
And that's part of that should be part of the fire mitigation plan that's written. Should have in their maintenance schedules or maintenance techniques when it needs to be occurred, or meetings with the fire departments to look and see if there's, that's something we can take care of in the plan. To answer your question about down the road. Now, where it gets put onto an HOA, you know, most HOAs either don't have, or don't exist after a while, or they don't
How do
keep
you
their
continue to
CCNRs
enforce
up
that
to-
into the future?
that's,
Because we are not part of the CCNRs.
right.
That's where the challenge comes.
It's all, I'm gonna relate it to noxious weeds. Because noxious weeds grow no matter what. But we have an ordinance and we have state law that says if you don't control your weeds, the county weed superintendent comes in and does it for you and sends you a bill. And it goes on, it's a leaned bill on your property tax.
So do we do that, implement that with fire mitigation?
Well, that goes way beyond this commission, but if we're gonna be serious about it.
But that, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Just to
Thanks, John.
see you, John.
Don't do your stuff, John.
Yeah, I think that because a lot of things in society are laws because it protects people's lives. And we live in a tinderbox area. If you have not read Helen Markley Miller's book about Valley County and read about the fire that swept Valley Valley County in the 1890s. You need to read that. It burned the whole valley. So we're ripe for that. Again, I hate to say that. But I think as public servants, we have a responsibility to set forth some things that will protect society. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox.
No, and I'm gonna go back a time and just try to summarize a little bit here is, I think the new subdivisions, moving or the new home sites as we work through them are one thing, and how we promote the language there, but there's also an education for the existing homes where we have the majority of our risk that's no longer. The new homes is prevention, the old homes is now, it's almost an individual risk mitigation, and there's a chance to some degree in the comprehensive plan to probably educate people on what the expectations are in Valley County around risk mitigation. I mean, we just personally had the Firewise team come in around our house and do about 20 acres total, and it is a challenging decision when we have 50 people in our subdivision to get them all to agree to go, from their view, destroy the homes of the bunnies to make a defensible area around your home so it doesn't burn. And we've been evacuated twice in the last 3 years.
Right.
So now you know where we live. But, it's not too hard to figure out. But so I understand the new. I'm struggling with how we provide that service or do something around the existing.
And
To
that's
be
what
honest
we
with you.
want as well.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we find grants to help facilitate a lot of this mitigation work. But as of right now, there's no way that we can force them to do mitigation work. Have put liens, homes and stuff like that, but then even then,
What's interesting is what one homeowner does or does not do
impacts it.
impacts their neighbor in this case.
And I think that's the biggest thing right now is more of that educational prevention. And trying to get that message out to encourage people, right? That have existing. That's that we do.
And I think in Cary up in around the McCall area, we've got tremendous amount of fuel going on. I mean, some of it's within the city limits as well.
And we have a design review with the city as well as in existing subdivisions that wants natural materials on the homes and prohibits anything that's manufactured or has any fire retardant capabilities, which is, I mean, it's a double negative.
Yeah, good.
So-
We're not reducing the overstory, because that's the big component too, is
Yep.
with the new development, that's more encouraged, is taking some larger trees where it's already developed, it's more costly,
Mhm.
it costs more. There is codes to not take large trees
Mhm.
within certain city limits. So, I mean, that is the hard thing that I think the whole culture, right? Like even 20 years ago, these trees were smaller, so they didn't look like they'd all be a huge canopy. Now it's trying to backtrack. And I think that's just across the board for private and public, right? So for us right now, one of the goals that we know we can impact truly is new developments. And so that's one of the biggest things that we know we can start at, and then hopefully in the future we can redact some of those other things. 'Cause new development's happening around everything that's happening right now, right? So that's kind of more the goal of the fire working group right now is what can we do in the future to prevent stuff. And yes, we do need to redact a lot of stuff, is what it is. We'll do education and outreach and get grants and, I mean,
You can try to, mark on that real quick, you can have a lot of money and go to a homeowner and say, we want to help you mitigate your property, and, you know, we love this look, we don't want you to touch it. And they had fire 100 feet back doorstep the last 2 years,
Yep.
and they don't want nothing to do with it.
Free money.
So, That's the struggle.
Yeah.
of what you deal with. You can almost do it for them and they don't want to know. They like
No.
it the way it is. It's a risk. It's a risk to your neighbors. It's a risk to the community. They don't want to hear that. It's a struggle on the education piece, but that's why we figured we do the new construction and try to
Create
get that better.
zones,
Yeah.
more ordinances, codes for the new stuff. Which will be more costly, but.
Definitely a multi-pronged approach here, and I agree that, you know, for new developments going forward, I think you definitely have our attention. Cinda, I have one quick question. Did you find the one area that you were concerned about?
I think there's a couple, but just to let the P and Z Commission know, we did go to the Board of County Commissioners about wildfire and things that we can do. What was it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, something like that. And they did list a bunch of things that we're going to implement now. But we have to write the ordinances for it, and we're gonna have a meeting Tuesday.
And that's for new development?
That's for
A lot of things.
existing development, new development. It has to do with grades of roads, driveways, landscaping, some fire resistant construction, dry hydrants. We have a whole list of things that they're interested in. So we're kind of backdooring the comprehensive plan, but we need to get it sooner than later.
I might actually address some of Carrie's points she raised about building materials.
Building material, removal of trees, that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Really good conversation.
So
So,
the things that on page 44, was that the one? Promote strategic development patterns that minimize interface between wildlands to promote urban areas expansion. That one.
what's the point there?
I think that's just kind of a reiteration of what the goal is.
Yeah. Clear, yeah.
And then, sorry, on page 53, it says utilize current wildland urban interface international fire code. I think we need to say portions of the WIWI codes, because there are some things in there we probably don't want to adopt.
Yeah, and some of the wording definitely might need to be.
So utilize portions of the current. And what was the other one that,
First one that I noticed was on page 18 with the CUP and PUD, which actually states promote all approved CUPs and PUD applicants to continue land use practices to reduce fire while waiting on development timelines. Like I said, some of these they'll be open for a long time. To this point as well is also some of those CUPs and PUDs that were created way back when. They don't have to do subdivision fire ordinances. So that's also a concern. So those are existing or they amend some of those boundaries. So are we requiring those open and existing CUPs and PUDs to now create a subdivision fire ordinance plan? And continue maintenance on the area since there is no development in there yet. Which, like we said, that's another cost, right? They go in there, they do some of the mitigation work, it grows within 5 to 10 years, depending on if it's brush or tree component, and then they have to go back in. So obviously developers are gonna have some discussion points on this.
I actually think you ought to say something like promote all approved, existing and new PUDs and CUPs continue the land use. To give you some, because the comp plan is an overarching document. It lays the groundwork for the ordinance. If we're serious about this, we ought to put it right in there.
so promote all existing and new.
Yeah.
Not
And
approved.
there should probably be some discussion about the word promote. Should be promote or require. mean, that's really what we're getting to, because this is where your neighbor does something that doesn't maintain, and it burned your house down.
And then you
Right.
find out your house is underinsured and you can't rebuild.
That's,
That's a whole.
your-
That's a-
issue.
That's a whole nother
Or you can't
can
get
of
insurance
worms.
on your place because the neighbor didn't do something.
right.
Or you just can't get insurance here in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's one of the principles for planning and zoning is there an action or inaction taken on a adjacent property that has a significant impact on the subject property? That's a principle found in many, many laws in our country. I think it's.
It should be require, not promote.
Right, but how exactly will we require an existing subdivision
Mhm.
to do that?
Is it just on areas that they haven't developed? That's the question.
Or anytime there's a variance requested or a lot change or a.
How do we require an existing subdivision now
Mhm.
to do this?
You would have to have other enabling ordinances in the county, such as what we do with weed management. That was the example I used to get that done. And this is a bigger discussion with the Board of County Commissioners. But
And is it something that's done at the time of assessment where people are going out and assessing and something's noticed?
I mean,
Or do we have an army of people going?
no, that's.
So that's, the require is really, because that puts an onus on us to do something.
Mhm.
Like hire,
Well, until we have that fire that burns down 200 houses in Valley County, we probably won't have as a requirement. When that day happens, it will become a requirement. And I'll say, we wish we should have done something.
okay, we'll just leave it required. I mean, I'm not gonna be the one that, destroys Valley County, but I'm just trying to make you think through what that word means.
No, I know, it means a lot more than what we have now, but at the same time, I don't want to have, a law enforcement out there saying, oh, you need to cut down that tree.
But
at the
that's
same-
what that means. I mean,
Flip
we're
side
gonna
of
go
that
out and
is-
require it.
What's the liability we're putting on the county if we say it's required and then we don't?
Oh, that's a good thought.
And there's definitely a balance. We haven't found that yet.
We're working on that.
Require on new and promote on existing.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we can,
It's-
I mean, it's a discussion point, right? And I think that's what's happening all over the West. It's not just.
Yes, we're not, it's,
how do we even enforce an existing homeowners association 10 years later, go through and clean up their property? I mean, the original developer is gone,
Some of them don't exist. I mean, HOAs
it disbanded.
I think the insurance companies are gonna take care of that part for us.
And they are, right?
Mhm.
And that's the sad part.
That's
because
the
like
really
you're saying,
sad part.
So
Neighbors
anyway,
are
with
affecting
that, let's,
neighbors. But I think the biggest ones for me that come in mind are existing large PUDs that have developed on portions of their 500-acre PUD, and they still have 500 acres that are undeveloped that never had to create a subdivision plan. So those are the, like I said, for me, it's what can we actually do and accomplish? And I feel like we can accomplish new. The existing is always going to be a big question, obviously. But we know we can do something with the new developments.
I think
But this isn't existing, so what do you do there?
I think carries on to something, actually, and maybe it requires another 7A and B that would require it on all new CUPs. And then for a comp plan, promote for all other landowners in the county.
not just CUPs or PUDs, everywhere.
And you can even spice it up and just say aggressively promote or something to that point where you're going beyond just the standard.
I mean, for
Now,
now,
if we're going for it, we want to get some teeth into it somehow, somewhere. But that's not the comp plan either.
Cindy, what do you think about that?
I wrote it down. Mara, there was one in here that I said no.
I know, I haven't got that one yet. I do. So another one that was a big question was page 34, encourage road maintenance and development consideration for future use planning in an event of a wildfire. This is more of an educational piece. A lot of fires are controlled and maintained by infrastructure and road developments. So that's more helping whoever's creating those subdivision fire plans to encourage. I know like not Boise County, but Boise City, they have an ordinance where if you are building within the foothills and you're on top of a ridge, you cannot have houses on both sides of that road. Because if there's an event of a fire, you have a road to be able to unfortunately burn off of or contain that fire on the opposite side.
Kind of a natural fire break.
Correct. And so that's more just verbiage to be able to allow whoever's writing those subdivision ordinance plans to include that into theirs and for developers to see that it is in the policy. It's not something that has to stay in there, but that's the reason why that was input in there.
So I believe in our current ordinances, not in the comp plan, but in the ordinances, we have requirements for multiple entrances into like a subdivision. Parts.
When we're capable.
When applicable, yes. That and or making it so that the turnaround is large enough for a actual structure apparatus.
And the fire department looks at all that. I still don't understand this 2A. Encourage road maintenance and development, consider for future use planning in an event of a wildfire. That connectivity, is that what we decided?
So like I said, it's more being able to allow those writers of that subdivision plan verbiage to encourage landowner or those developers not to, if they are developing where it's on top of a bridge, to not develop on both sides of that leeward side of that road.
Got it.
That one's not, doesn't have to stay in there. It was just, like I said, more verbiage of an education piece of how fires are maintained and controlled.
Is there a best practices for that? Is this an opportunity for promoting some best practices around?
I like that
Yeah.
idea. Because it's more of an education.
Yeah, it's.
I put ridge lines, draws, and fire pathways.
I understand that. I will say I didn't understand
The verbiage.
where you were going with it.
So maybe change the statement to read, encourage BMPs for fire.
Yeah, I do like that. Yep.
I mean, it's in a comp plan, that's
Yep.
kind of where it belongs.
Yep. No, I actually like
I'll
that
let you
verbiage.
figure out the verbiage.
There was another one, Mara, that I was like, it was gonna prevent all development in Valley County, basically. It was something that just,
Almost do.
it's too ordinancy.
I know. I think it was on page 45, I believe. Which is in economic development. We wrote wildfire is a natural phenomenon with substantial economic consequences and management is complex, dynamic, and rife with incentive problems. Communities have increased their demographic and economic footprint, placing more highly valued property at risk. These two factors combined with changing climate have led to unprecedented fire activity and consequences to society.
It was that last sentence that was a little,
And this can be reworded, but more of it's,
Political.
like I said, it's more of an educational piece of wildfire is being, the urban interface is encroaching into.
I think it was just the last sentence that was kind of,
Yeah.
was more political.
Yes, I think the fear is that this will always be quoted as when people are developing within urban interface. And really for us, it's more that educational piece of it. Wildfire is a huge piece of culture. We have to realize the risks that we're taking when we put developments in these urban interfaces.
I mean, even if we took out the last sentence and put, fire, after fire, decreases tax bases in all communities or something like that, and affects it, all budgets type of thing. First economy, something, I don't know.
If you want to get rid of the, with a changing climate, is that what you're after?
And consequences to society,
And then just strike those.
just that sentence.
Well, you could leave the sentence, strike those words.
Have led to unprecedented fire activity.
Yeah.
And
That's,
take
because
out-
that's a true statement.
Yep, right.
It's a simple statement.
Okay, I get that.
I think that was the main, those were the two that you had in our meeting, Linda. Oh, also page 69. So this is a land use. We added wildland urban interface defined as the area where houses are in or near wildland vegetation. The WUI is where wildfire poses the greatest risk to people and homes due to proximity of flammable vegetation. Development in the WUI also contributes to habitat fragmentation and other environmental conflicts. For those reasons, development should be carefully considered and should include practices, protections such as fire wires, landscaping, appropriate building materials, and so on.
And I think it was the habitat fragmentation. You're talking wildlife,
Yeah,
and I don't know why we're making a wildlife statement in
land use.
the WUI.
Yep, and we can take that part out.
Actually like the rest of it.
Isn't the wildlife addressed somewhere else? In a different
Yes.
chapter?
Yeah, there's another.
So just delete that sentence.
Contributes. Or it contributes to environmental conflicts. Various environmental conflicts. And then there's your weeds and the woolies.
Like I said, the main goal for the fire working group was to embed fire more into all aspects. It influences all of it.
Yeah, I mean, this was really good.
Yeah.
Fit with the other tone.
Okay. Anything else on the fire?
I said I hate writing, so I'm glad that.
It's in, yeah, you've got several places where you identify weeds as, fuel, and that's what it is. Cattails, dry cattails. Okay, fire guy. Okay. You got more expertise in this than
Got what?
the rest of us.
We talked about a lot of issues.
Did you see anything that wasn't appropriate in our comp plan?
Well, looks like it will. It's just the enforcement, I would like to say, but things around that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's probably gonna take a bit. That's a lot of destruction. Because
Sometimes that doesn't even do it. They're just people in a little bubble and all they care about is their property, so you have to make them care.
it's
You
like,
can write things like if you don't, to cut you off, but not- if you don't take care of your property and it burns down your neighbor's property, you're responsible for that, and then they're gonna take it seriously. Stuff like that, because you really have no teeth if you clean your property and your neighbor doesn't, and it impacts your structure and burns your house down. Well, now they didn't, you know what I mean? So there's ways around that.
could you look at the Idaho law, Cinda, and see what's in there? Similar to,
Pretty negligent on your neighbor, but
Laura would know, she's
I'm not a
the,
lawyer, you gotta write it.
There's no
You know.
actual
You
regulation
gotta
unless it's
prove it,
within
too.
city
Well,
limits. So there's
you can
certain
tell
cities
fire
that
coming
are
from your neighbors.
truly putting liens on
So easy
people's
about
properties and
property,
homes
so
if
you
they're
can
not
have
doing mitigation.
30 feet
Spokane
around the property,
Valley is actually
30
one
by
of them,
100. The property line
but
is
it's
right
actually
there.
not
Within the 30, because how am I gonna, can't do the 30 because the fence is.
So that is one thing that I have noticed. More of the WUI zones are more created for new infrastructure and buildings. It's all the existing stuff that's
Kind of a-
kind of really the unknown in a lot of the
so
western
it's- you
states.
run into that.
which takes us to the next topic. And we did talk to the board about this, and that's creating overlay zones for different fire risk categories and having different fire codes in those different categories.
So we didn't,
So there would be a map in the comprehensive plan
right,
that shows those hazard areas. And then we would write specific codes for those hazard areas, based on your trees.
okay. And as our previous discussion with the Soil and Water Conservation District, we talked about having on the building permit sign off line. I mean, is that something we want to talk
We
about
talked about that with the board.
as a sign off for
They are
fire?
ready for that.
I actually think.
What's the other thing? Oh, can you talk a little bit, just because this was interesting, and I think I've talked to Ben about this too. If you talk about those California fires, and it's the high-density houses that are close together that spread the fires, and the fire department in McCall is doing a study. What is that program they're using?
land tender right now?
No, the other one.
Oh, silo plan.
Silo plan will come in and determine where the fire paths are, and that's where you should be putting your mitigation. So if a developer is developing property and it's determined there's a fire pathway going through there, they should, not do development there, they should do their fire mitigation there in those pathways, because they can identify the pathways, how the fire gets into the communities.
Because of fuel loading and
Yes.
stuff like that.
And topography.
Topography.
Yep. And it's based off of the most extreme fire day within any given area.
It's really interesting.
So it does, and that's something that the fire working group wants to also approach P and Z about, is trying to have developers required to do some of this modeling before they create development sites and or put it into their subdivision fire ordinances. So it's actually like a scientific database allowing them to identify fire pathways and where mitigation work should be done to help prevent some of these big catastrophes. I think one of the hard things with that is based off of current homes and structures in that area. So once you put structures in there, you actually get more fire risk, right? So like certain areas, you can run that modeling, but it's based off of that timber and the trees that are there right now. So there is a little bit of data that's skewed because of that reason, right? Because it's not based off of what homes are there, it's based off of what homes are right here, and if you're gonna develop here, it's only based off of the trees that are there. It can still identify work that needs to be done, right? But if you put homes here, 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 you may have to do more work out here. And it's not gonna identify that because it's now not pushing it out.
So in the comp plan, we would say something about, promote fire modeling to determine fire pathways and things.
Yep.
And then we could determine in an ordinance what they need, what is required, or if the county's going to do that or something.
I like that.
When will this study be completed?
So McCall Fire is actually paying for their fire district, and it should be done in the next month.
Very cool.
And
So
so it's just in the McCall Rural Fire.
Yeah, and so this company specifically has done a lot of modeling out of California, and has been going to a lot of these fire chief meetings and promoting what their product is. They haven't done anything in Idaho, so this would be the first modeling that has been conducted in actually Idaho itself, for that specific company. I'm sure other companies have done it, right? But when they get that done, we can actually have City of McCall Fire, and then come in for the presentation. And obviously, there's a lot of companies that are starting to do this. I mean, fire modeling is not a new invention. It really isn't. It's been in the fire industry, Forest Service for a long time.
This could be a really good tool to take up with the Bureau of Population. They have a huge footprint and around a lot of homes in the area, which their treatment of those areas is pretty dismal.
We can insert that. Can we take a?
Yeah.
Are we done with fire?
Yeah, unless you have anything else. Laura, it's been very good discussion.
Yeah.
Again, just welcome your input at any time. Trying to make this ordinance
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break or so.
The plan is to insert Mara's position into some of the review of the fire plans and things.
And to give you guys kind of a little background, I have 14 years in wildland fire, so I fought wildland fire for a long time before I took this.
Is the recording off? We're going to take a break, right? Yeah. Let's go ahead.
I should know that everything is recorded.
It's not a job interview, come on.
I know, you're hired already. Thank you guys, appreciate it, yeah.
Got an interesting experience this week. I'm actually going down to those burn areas in California.
How are you? Oh,
Do some volunteer work.
there you go. Are you going to Red Cross or?
No, it's actually our, the company I work for is stepping up. They're going to do quite a bit of stuff. So
Wow.
taking my grandson with me.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's gonna be it's a hard thing to see.
And right now, the insurance companies aren't paying out.
It's just
That's
Yeah, let's
Okay.
proceed this.
Okay, so we're reconvening. I guess the first thing that I want to say is I really appreciate the discussions we've had this morning. I thought the Firewise one was great. And I think the water one actually has been a good outcome as well. I guess from my perspective on the comp plan, maybe over the course of the next month or so, if we can get. Are you keeping track of this in an underlined strikeout method?
No.
You do
There
that?
is way too much, Ken, that's been changed and manipulated throughout the years. That it's all gonna be underlined or struck or red or green or purple.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm pulling from the 2018
That's the baseline.
as the baseline and imposing your changes into that, putting your changes into that. And so you'll just have a document to read. So it'll be fresh and we're not wondering, oh, why did we change that and things. I didn't do a legislative copy because the whole thing would be legislative.
So what maybe in the course of the next, whatever time frame, Cindy, you think we need to get that ready? The changes that we have kind of agreed on, go through the comp plan here months ago. And I think those things we're pretty much in agreement on. I'd like this, from my perspective, you guys chime in here. I'd like to see maybe some of the changes that we talked about with the fire.
Today.
and, some of the soil, water conservation districts parsed out. I do not want to put all of their stuff in. You know, so Cindy and I were just talking during the break that maybe it makes sense to have her do a run at trying to put the appropriate things. And then we can follow up with post.
So I had, like I told you at the meeting, and we didn't have time to go through it all, gone through everything I have saved through the years about interesting things, applicable things to Valley County. And I had given you this list. Utilities sections, I plan on, putting in some North Lake information, North Lake sewer boundaries, promotion of LIDs, local improvement districts. Solar and windmills are not desirable on the scenic byways. And then the West Central Mountains Electrical Plan, that's a document that Idaho Power did. And then we talked about that governance section. And we thought maybe that should just be like an introduction to the comp plan.
Right.
And so I'll write that. In the land use, the Payette Land Trust and conservation easements. And maybe a mention of a dark, at some point, trying to do a dark sky reserve. Or, because we have dark sky ordinance, we might as well do those extra efforts to be recognized as a dark sky reserve. And then hazard, BSU is currently doing a holistic regional resiliency assessment and strategy. We need to put in the radon. And then all the Firewise language. Housing, this was kind of interesting. We just did the housing needs assessment. So we need to put that in there. There's an MOU between Central District Health and DEQ that talks about things. I think I sent you guys a copy of that. And then the gentrification of even rural areas now versus just urban areas. I thought that was very interesting. I've got that found out here too, if you want to see that. There's a toolkit for health and equity items. I want to talk some about higher density things like ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, and inserting some of that in commercial areas. I mean, do something about, it doesn't, the variety of housing is what I think it says now, and I think we need to expand that a little bit
In the comp plan.
in the comp plan. just identify some of those things, you know, that there's different things that can be done. And then we'll define it specifically in the ordinance. We did the winter recreation parking needs. I have some updates that were submitted a few years ago from Valley County Pathways. Sitting here, and then the master transportation plan was recently completed. The economy, the executive summary on the economic impact and importance of snowmobiling in Idaho. I've got that document, and I have the one on the importance of power boating in Idaho.
Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen.
And then inspiring the future outdoor recreation economy, because it's a large contributor to the GDP. And then there's health and equity considerations with that the economy, and then NAR communities. That's the, you know what a NAR community is?
Negative.
Oh, I do. It's
Like,
recreation.
Please share.
It's gateway
It's
communities.
It's NAR, GNAR.
GNAR, Gateway Natural Area Recreation, something like that.
Yeah,
It's the gateways to public lands.
like Colorado has a really cool.
Utah has I think it originated out of Utah.
Mhm.
And I've got all that verbiage. You want to look up NAR while you're,
Yes.
the specific words.
You skipped over Streamline Modular Homes. What was that about?
I don't know, streamline modular homes. Oh,
It's kind of vague, so that's what I was wondering.
that is vague. I'll know,
You didn't take enough notes on that one.
I didn't. Streamline. Oh, my other, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Was it the concept of like where they're located or design requirements? Have separate requirements.
Well, the building permit isn't as excessive. I don't know. I'll have to get back to that one. I'm sorry, Ben. That one, that's why I skipped over it.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, there is a discussion, and I don't even know if I would want to even bring this up, about decreasing some of our codes, like snow loads, that type of thing, to create more affordable housing. I mean, streamline some of the processing, create more affordable housing in certain areas.
Our snow loads, they differ through the valley,
They
is
do.
that?
They go from like 120 to 150, 180.
Isn't there a wind load too?
There's wind load, there's seismic.
115?
So, we'll more to come on that one. Yeah, thanks for noticing the one that I didn't have the answer to.
Oh, yeah.
And then the
Sure.
definition of prime ag land. You know, some definitions have, you know, capable of producing marketable farm animals and crops. Some people want it just irrigated lands, but then, you know, dry pastures also, you know, provide pasture. So I
Yeah.
kind of like this, capable of producing marketable.
Isn't that group, what's the advisory group? Agricultural Lands Protection Group? Say again?
Agriculture, the APA Commission?
Yeah, the APA Commission, aren't they doing some of that work?
No. No, they're just looking at people that want to apply.
So NAR is Gateway and Natural Amenity Region Initiative.
Challenges to gateway communities.
There's a sign that comes into Donley, Gateway to Recreation.
Recreation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a whole initiative that I'll find some stuff on that. And see the agricultural, the source water protection high priority areas flyer. Oh, that's this one here. And they identify source water protection areas. And I'd like to at least give a shout out that this work has been done. It's done by the NRCS. Yep. And wildlife, Lori's working on, with the Fish and Game, on getting some verbiage or something they'd like to see in our comp plan for wildlife and riparian areas. Correct, Lori?
Yeah, it reminds me, I'll reach back out to Brandon. I talked to him on the phone, but haven't done anything recently. We've
So
got the general subdivision recommendations.
that's for, corridors, are they, depredation? I mean, is there one super corridor that we need to protect? That kind of thing. So we're trying to find out that information from them. And then we have the impact area discussion coming up with the city of McCall. That's March 10th. And we've already talked with Cascade and Donley. And so there'll be a section of the comp plan on impact areas.
You said March 12th.
Yes.
Okay. Is that with the board?
Board of County Commissioners and Donley City Council.
Is that something that you want us to be at as observers?
You're welcome to be there. It's a public meeting. And it's a legislative matter. Okay? Absolutely. It's at the McCall Library.
I'm actually trying.
Oh,
I won't be, but I might be.
probably Carrie would be there.
Can we tune in?
Where do you want me to be?
Yes, yes, I think they can
Oh.
zoom in.
Discussion with the
I'm
call.
going to be there. I
Yeah.
actually submitted comments on that.
I have one under the ag issues. I think it wouldn't hurt in our comp plan to reach and support EMCs on ag land. Because there are a limited number of agricultural operations, actually. It's ag BMVs.
That's what this is. The Source Water Protection High Priority Areas Initiative to help agricultural producers in priority watersheds apply conservation practices that include a wide variety of actions and activities aimed at safeguarding, maintaining, or improving the quality and or quantity of sources of drinking water in their contributing areas. So that puts the conservation activities on the ag users to protect drinking water. That kind of.
I mean, that kind of covers it. That's using if there's a way that our comp plan that we can encourage other agricultural producers to actually participate. That's the end.
Encourage ag producers.
Sometimes there's county support for some programs.
Such as the sprinklers.
Conversions,
Conversions.
bank stabilizations. I mean, our jurisdiction really doesn't have anything to do with ag, but yet our comp plan should encourage those practices. So,
As an education tool, okay.
that's, I mean,
And some people have taken advantage of it. And there's a lot of grants out there for it too. So, and then I listed on this sheet what our goal is, which is to comply with 676508 in the state codes, the Local Land Use Planning Act. And we're supposed to talk about the property rights, population, school facilities and transportation, economic development, land use, and all of these things, and make sure that we have covered it in our comp plan. Okay. And like community design is interwoven with the housing. Valley Soil had put a bunch of their water quality stuff into their into the population chapter. Those are the kinds of things that should be moved to a different section. And then the National Interstate Electric Transmission Corridor, that'll be an interesting. And another new one is, since we did our last update, is the public airport facilities. So that'll probably go in our transportation section.
So I think do we have, I guess we have one power line that meets that requirement. 115,000.
I'll ask, I don't.
It used to be 69,000.
And that's part of that West Central Mountains electrical plan. I participated in that, I think it was 10 years ago, and they're going to start up that activity again this fall.
It would be interesting to know if we have any that actually meet that, and then what is the proposed voltage of the line going to Stibnite? If that project moves forward, then what special conditions would we have to have over that line of sight? So then that, I don't.
When it comes to Smith's Ferry, is not.
It didn't used to be. It was, used to be. And then, are there special requirements for those corridors? If it's a state law, what does it mean? Setbacks?
I'll ask Idaho Power to address that. I'll go to the expert. And then the last thing I had was the maps, if you want to talk about those again. And these are just, originally we called them blobs, now we're just calling them vicinities. They're not hard lines. I wish there was a way we could fade the boundary of those. And we did need to change the part south of Donley and Davis Creek Lane on the east side, because that is ag through there.
In a white area that's not delineated, what does that mean?
We didn't cover the entire valley. I mean, this purple area west of Roseberry, I don't know that I would go that far north with the purple. Maybe, yeah, but then, that's going to become a major corridor. Norwood. At least to Shaline, if not up to Smiley, because they're going to do a second corridor
Is it
somewhere.
Shaline or Shalene?
Shaline. A Potter or Potter?
In the creek, crick.
Creek.
Depends upon the
Depends
size
on
of
where
it.
you live.
You have a crick in your neck. You have a creek that runs water.
Otherwise, you'd say, I'll see you next week, right? To eat, right?
Or it's like
So, if there's any, the part west of West Mountain Road, that should be purple. We have subdivisions in there.
Money bags.
I mean, that's all the Blackhawk stuff.
Unfortunately.
So just from a perspective, why not fill in all the areas as a color? They're not hard boundaries, they're vicinities. Why leave open white space as opposed to define it as a vicinity? I mean, if we colored it all and called it a vicinity,
Mhm.
we're not ruling something out, we're just giving it as a guideline.
Oh.
What's the thinking?
Kind of that it would be less perception of a zone. And then like the area between Heinrich and West Lake Fork. I mean, is residential gonna push south or is ag gonna push north? Just kind of leaves an area between. I mean, because, and we need to write something into the plan that this is not a zoning code. Just
Right.
because something is purple doesn't mean you can't have an ag use, or just because something is agricultural doesn't mean you can't have a residential use. These are just currently where these uses are taking place. Steve?
But, I mean, even within some of the ag areas, you have residential areas, you still have ag.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering if you know.
But I think
It's
that,
kind of directional.
I think what Cinda's after is what is the general activity or the land use in those areas? And instead of having a hard edged line, I think there's a way to actually blur those in colors.
Fade.
So you have a faded border.
And then if we have white, it'd be better to
To
blur.
blur it.
Yeah.
I think
Kind of like the,
recognizing the area is, it feels important where when it's just the white space, it's like we didn't think about that area yet. But I understand conceptually what you're trying to get across.
Like
And we
that,
don't like the hard zones.
like the gap there on where Shaline.
Yeah,
is.
Shaline is,
So
or
you could bring the green area down to Shaline and then bring the purple up below 55. Fill that in.
there's also kind of a protection for the scenic byway.
That's the blue. That area that's still left white is basically that low area you can't even see.
Mhm.
I tend to agree that the stuff west of West Mountain Road should probably some exceptions.
Well, that starts to go kind of counter to our WUI discussion of moving things out of WUI areas.
Yeah, there's actually still quite a bit. At least on the north side.
On the north end.
So Lori, are you picking up all of this?
Oh,
Okay.
the specifics, no. Some of them.
Go back and look. I was looking for the economic plan in here.
And Cinda, the way it looks on the map, you're trying to capture basically the valley floor, private land.
Yeah. It's just the valley floor. I didn't go up into the mountain areas and things like that. We'll just do that in red. Now we're gonna have a hazard mitigation, fire hazard map in here. Lori, do you know where the Valley County Master,
Your place, it's not even there. I think I've seen, someone did some.
Just another layer out there.
There's. This residential. Fairbrother Lane. But Smiley Lane crosses the.
Scroll down, does it come up? Is it?
Dividing line.
An area would be nice. Both sides of it.
Some, this is all. Could actually use Heinrich as the line and blur both ways. That kind of fills up.
this is what I was going for. It's just a light haze, not so zone-ish. This is in the master facilities plan.
Where it doesn't have any defined line, it's more spray painted.
Right, right.
They can set the parameters on this. I don't know who did these maps for you.
What's that?
Magenta vignette.
Yeah.
You can set that way.
See.
Okay, well, I'll have her, I'll tell her that this is more what we want it to look like. And you'll give me your maps that you're.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's not up to me. It's up to this group.
But you guys are talking and I was looking for this.
So,
and I
yeah,
all your
it's-
changes.
This is kind of what I was drawing out, is that, and what it said is that this ag expanded there, expand this ag. Use Heinrich as a line.
Yeah.
Cascade.
Cinda, is there
This is-
anything
this
with
is all
the yellow fire expansion
full of water right
control that we need
This,
to reference on
right there.
Right.
housing? That's kind of a big, potentially it's a big thing
What
out
if
there, but
This is,
they'll just come in with a conditional use permit,
this should
It'll-
probably.
rise and die again.
Residential.
Anything we can permit will just be a CUP.
It's
They have
either
very
federal
limited
ground.
private property back there that we could even,
Already, so.
almost all of it's Forest Service land.
in my opinion, which brings me to the question.
This is Forest Service, yeah. This is.
Dead now.
This is all.
Primary access plan to be out.
So Smith's Ferry, I'm gonna do any ag down there.
From Lake to, it's
Right.
called Burnt Log, the landmark. And then it's gonna kind of bypass Yellowknife.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's,
Where's your
Put in,
residential?
they put in a
Just along there.
yeah, you can't even build out here. I mean, a lot of houses up there. Across the valley. That should be,
This should be
who's the
residential.
brow? Up here. Yeah, so, and this would be, the rest of it's just
Here's Burnt
patchy,
Log Road.
house
From
here,
here.
house there.
Goes up,
You know what I mean?
and they'll extend it through.
They'll extend it
Yeah.
up to the site. Interesting.
My property's ags.
Straight to Stibnite.
Great.
Goes behind here.
You guys talk it over. I think we got, because
Okay, so get me your
I'm
maps.
saying this should be Cumberland,
it's the expert down this.
or what should be,
That's what's nice is they're
Residential
having
right there.
this should be
presentation.
really not gonna be
Mhm.
ag.
Just wondering,
No,
part of that was what spurred my thought here.
And
we've got it going.
this should be really.
Very little
Mhm.
private property.
Pretty
up there.
small
Put the ag
amount of
there.
private property.
He's saying make this ag.
And most of their
Yeah.
stuff will happen up in here.
I'll get 2 maps mixed up.
Um,
Does it say?
another
So
thought,
these are, yeah, and then there's like that. And then there's like four.
on,
Residential here,
Ag.
ag.
along the scenic
Like
byway,
where
we
these-
tried that before, we'll take care of that
Yeah.
another day. Some people
And
want
Heinrichs
design
Line.
guidelines
Yeah.
On the scenic byway.
on all scenic byways. Like an expansion of McCall's scenic byways. And then what would those design guidelines be? All wood and rock? I mean, it's
Natural.
But-
Products.
the beauty of which beholder. Or you have the most experience with
Natural building products.
design guidelines.
They want natural, all natural materials, less concrete, more stone, more wood. But we're running in like the fire issues, mitigation, properties of natural product over steel, concrete. But steel and concrete make the structure cold and less natural looking.
And some people like the modern look. It's a modern,
It's switched.
That's realistically where all the design guidelines are headed,
to the modern.
to more of a modern, more glass, steel, and concrete. But like on the lake, it's the opposite. They're not wanting a whole lot of that. They want the natural timbers, they want the wooded lots, they want all those things.
I think we're past the days of people putting on aluminum galvanized roofing. that reflect.
I kind of like it because then they get that green look. What's that, patina?
Patina.
I almost put one in my house this year. I put a metal roof on, and if it wasn't as much, I would have gotten that so it would patina out because I like it. I like the industrial.
But it's not really reflective.
No, it's not reflective.
I still have one of those roofs on. It's like-
Oh, okay, one of those. Okay,
I don't know. I like the variety of people's personality as they design their buildings sometimes. And to Carrie's point about requiring natural building products that are fire resistant, that's not smart. And then you gotta think of longevity of the building. A lot of people these days are putting wainscoting metal inside of the building
Mhm.
to protect the building. And it actually looks pretty good.
Yeah, from a maintenance standpoint, we recommend the wainscoting in either stone or steel. And then for longevity, as far as maintenance and upkeep too, the manufactured products last so much longer. Like you take a pine or fir siding, cedar, for instance, you're treating that every 3 to 5 years to the tune of $45,000, depending on how large your house is, versus an LP Smart Side or a pre-treated manufactured. It's a baked-on finish essentially. Those are lasting 30 years, no maintenance. So you also have the look and feel of things as well. You go out to, I hate to bag on Blackhawk Ranch on the river, but they require all natural products. So you go out there and you see the people who've maintained the exterior of their home, and then you see the ones who haven't, and it looks dilapidated and depressed. So, but they're a subdivision that don't allow manufactured products.
So some of the design you can do through form and structure, allowing, just a blank wall, they have to put some sort of entry over their door. I mean, just something formed. Windows that break up the monotony of just a blank wall type of thing. You can do that type of,
Or go from a horizontal to a vertical
Right. Just break up the.
with a belly band.
If all the buildings look the same, it would be,
I agree.
even if they all look nice, it would still be.
See, the chief is putting some stuff on the top of the stucco. I think it's looking great.
Yeah,
Cover up the hole where they ripped the sign off.
Oh gosh.
I think individual subdivisions, if they have a style that they want to portray, I mean, I can understand why Tamarack wants to have a style of construction in their village.
Mhm.
That makes sense. But that's certain about scenic byway and all the buildings.
Or if we want to be the ones controlling it.
Look and feel's one thing. Because with some of the man-made materials you have now, look and feel of natural materials without the fan of materials mandates, but
As far as affordability, like you take a natural product like cedar,
buy some cedar trim.
you're putting on a $50,000 siding package, and then you're paying another $40,000 on top of that to stain it and seal it. When you can get a much less expensive product that's already even pre-finished, that's a third of the cost, a quarter of the cost.
Be like doing a deck and wood or track.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Pretty much.
and I have a love-hate relationship with
Yeah.
composite decking up here.
Especially older stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
Did a 1,400
still flammable.
wood deck
you know what I
last
mean?
year.
They say it
Rex.
won't, but it just melts.
Looks
and it-
beautiful.
It'll just melt. It
And then it
won't
burns
start.
anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's still flammable, it's just gonna hit the ground and it'll light on fire. You know?
Mhm.
It'll be all gooey, so.
What do we need, Phil,
Yeah, I
for today?
like that.
What
you
else
drew
is
on
left?
That's basically, I think we've covered, I have good direction.
We're in agreement with that.
Now I need time.
As long as we're not your holdup, we're in a good place.
Sorry, not my hold up after today.
Well, it depends.
I think we're in agreement on those.
Okay.
Just ag residential additions, and then kind of blend the lines so it's not a hard line in the map, so it blurs out.
I like that spray
on each
paint.
side.
Tag it, Cinda.
Tag it.
Tag it.
Ag it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else for the work session? At some point in time in our work session, I told this to Cindy the other day that I wouldn't mind having some little mock parliamentary kind of things.
That'd be fun.
Some verbiage. I actually attended a planning and zoning meeting the other day down in the valley. And I kind of listened to how they and stuff, and I thought, oh, that would make sense for us to do. So look for ideas about how to run a meeting. I will encourage you when you make a motion that the verbiage that you should use is, I move that we do such and such.
I so move.
And you say, you make cakes.
Mhm.
But you move motions. I just say, I move. And then, just other little simple things about, how we move the topics around. I think I might put together, there's actually some parliamentary cheat sheets that we could, I think, send to you. But I'll try to help facilitate that.
So Ken, is it mostly about how they make a motion?
Yeah, and then what the different types of motions are. Tabling, postponements, those, just basic parliamentary. And I'm going to also suggest that I really like this format. And we should maybe try it in a couple of meetings. See how it works.
The only awkward point will be the people sitting at the ends and visuals, but I guess they can turn it. But I do like it too.
I like the tables just because it doesn't feel like I'm sitting up as a judge. You
As a
feel like
ruler?
you're sitting up and
I like sitting up there.
sitting,
Look down on the subject.
a little more collaborative feel. when
I don't know, it's up to
We're gonna watch you.
Hopefully the Board of County Commissioners will remodel them.
No, this was the remodel. Oh, you mean that up there?
I don't have anything else. Things to do today. Do you guys, anything else you want to chat about?
I accidentally looked at my phone, so yeah, I've got lots of stuff to go do.
All right,
Don't look at your phone.
thank you all. I really appreciate the conversations we had today. I think it was productive. Send us some direction about this comp plan. If there's nothing else, we will be adjourned.
I have one.